Gather round. I want to tell you the story about your great-great-grandfather, James Rupert Bell Sr. James Rupert Bell Sr., J.R. Bell for short, was my father's dad. My dad, Charles Bell Sr., was the youngest of 17 children.
17 kids?
Yes, 17 kids. 10 boys and 7 girls. But those 17 kids came from 3 different wives. His first wife was Octavia R. Bell. They had 2 boys and 2 girls. Their names were James Rupert Bell Jr., George Bell, Ethel Bell, and Ruth Bell. His second wife was Maggie Bell. 3 boys, Thomas Nicholas Bell, Michael Bell, and Henry Bell, were born through that marriage union. His third wife was Sarah Jane Rupert Bell. The remaining 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls, were born through their marriage, and their names are Alexander Graham Bell Sr., Robert Lee Bell Sr., Virgil Bell, Herbert Hoover Bell, Charles Delta Bell Sr., Esther Bell, Beatrice Bell, Helen Bell, Lula Bell, and Rosie Bell. Your great-great-grandfather, James Rupert Bell Sr., was a minister of Christ and a preacher of the gospel. He loved God, he loved people, and he was a man of honor. He was a faithful husband and a loving father. He came from, hey, just thought of something. How would you all like to help me tell the story of your great-great-grandfather?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I'll tell you what. You can all help me read it, and we'll start from the oldest to the youngest, okay?
Okay.
But Poppy's daddy, me and I are the same age, so who will go first?
Good question, Colin. We will let whoever was born first go first. Aniyah was born in January 2014, and you were born in March of the same year. So Aniyah will read before you. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so the reading order will be Amani, Sophie, Aniyah, then Colin. Are you ready, Amani?
Ready, Papa. Our great-great-grandfather James Rupert Bell Sr. came from the state of Mississippi. He moved to the state of Arkansas, then later moved to the state of Missouri. In the early 1940s, he moved his family from Wellborn in southeast Missouri to a town in southern Illinois named Olmsted. J.R. Bell Sr. was a man of great faith in God. He was faithful to God and man. He was dependable and reliable. He would set his watch a few minutes fast to make sure he was always on time for an appointment. And he was never known to be late for anything. He would always say, "The early bird gets the worm."
Okay, Sophie, your turn.
J.R. Bell Sr. was a man of action who worked hard to make things happen. He was a man who never used the word can't. Whatever needed to be done, he believed could be done, and moved into action to make it happen. J.R. Bell Sr. accomplished much in his lifetime, much more than we are able to tell. He was a successful farmer. He raised 2 bales of cotton per acre, which most farmers could not do. He was not only a good husband, father, and family man, but he was a concerned citizen who fought for the rights of mankind. He, along with a few others, were instrumental in getting new and better schools for the children in Lilburn, Missouri.
Your turn, Aniyah.
He built a subdivision of residential houses which he allowed people to live in for little or no rent. Of course, he lost money, but his aim was not to make money. It was to help people. He also built a church building in Olmsted, Illinois. J.R. Bell Sr. was not only involved in local church work, but also in state and national conventions. He believed that if the world would ever be a better place to live, the people of God will bring it about. He was a member of the NAACP and at an old age took part in the Martin Luther King March.
Okay, Colin.
J.R. Bell Sr. was a man of his word and had no use for liars. He always said a person who will lie will steal. J.R. Bell Sr. always kept his promise. If he promised to give his children a whipping, sooner or later, even if it was 2 weeks later, he gave it to them. He was no doubt the only man in his day that could get a loan on his word. He could get $1,000 loan with no paperwork because he proved himself to be trustworthy. They would say, "Preacher will pay." J.R. Bell Sr. was a righteous man who lived what he talked and preached about. We are not saying he was perfect, but his desire was to please God. He tried to the best of his ability to live right according to God's standard of righteousness, according to the Bible, God's word.
Wow, you guys did a great job. Want to hear a funny story that our cousin Ed shared about J.R. Bell Sr.?
Yeah, sure.
But who is Cousin Ed?
Good question, Aniyah. Cousin Ed, Willie Edward Bell, is the second oldest son of Aunt Rosie Bell. Remember, your great-great-grandfather, J.R. Bell Sr., had 17 children. Our Aunt Rosie is one of them, and Ed is one of her sons. Okay. One day on Granddad J.R.'s farm, when Ed was 7 or 8 years old, Ed accidentally hit one of the chickens with a piece of kindling, and it knocked the chicken out cold. A kindling is small sticks or twigs used to start a fire. Granddad J.R. ran over, picked up the chicken, and began to rub it softly. Then he opened the chicken's mouth and blew in it. He rubbed the chicken again and blew in its mouth again. The chicken began to wake up. So Granddad put the chicken down, and the chicken began to run sort of drunk-like in one direction, and Cousin Ed took off running in the other direction. Cousin Ed wasn't going to stick around to see what was going to happen next. Yeah, that was pretty funny.
So, will we see Cousin Ed and Aunt Rosie at the family reunion?
We sure will. And speaking of the family reunion, do you know how our family reunion tradition got started?
Well, no.
It all began in June of 1964, when Sarah, Granddad's third wife, passed away. Many of the Bell family and friends from all parts of the country attended her funeral in Olmsted, Illinois. One of Granddad's sons, Thomas Nicholas Bell, had not been seen by the family in 30 years, but he came home for the funeral. Of course, Granddad and all the family were glad to see him, and it was indeed a family reunion. But Granddad said, "It is good for us to come together, but let's not wait for the death of a family member to bring us together." Granddad suggested that we have an annual family reunion so that we can grow closer and build stronger relationships. Everyone agreed, and the date was set for the same time the following year, June of 1965. So June of 1964 was counted as our first Bell family reunion, which means that this year, 2024, we will celebrate our 60th Bell family reunion. The family reunions were a lot different back then compared to how they are now. Don't get me wrong, we always had a lot of fun, but we never used to stay in hotels like we do now. After Grandma Sarah's funeral, Granddad moved to Peoria, Illinois with his children who lived there, and the Bell family reunion was hosted in Peoria, Illinois for the next few years. The following years after that, it was hosted back and forth between Kansas City, Missouri, and Peoria, Illinois. During those years, we stayed in the homes of the family and friends who hosted the reunion. Some had to sleep on the floor or wherever they could. It was a fun time, but as the Bells continued to multiply, there was no way to get all the Bells in a few houses, so we had to begin staying in hotels. The Bell families began to spread throughout the country, and the Bell family reunion is now hosted in other cities and states wherever there is a Bell. Legacy. The definition of a legacy is the long-lasting impact of events and actions that took place in the past of a person's life. James Rupert Bell Sr. left a rich legacy of faith, love, commitment, selflessness, endurance, and integrity. He was an honorable man with a strong work ethic. He was a righteous man who loved God, his family, and believed in fighting for the rights of others. James Rupert Bell Sr. achieved great things in his lifetime, but more importantly, he treated others well and created a reputation of integrity. Bell family, let us continue the legacy of James Rupert Bell Sr. as loving and faithful husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, and sons and daughters. We must continue to tell the story and share our history with our children, our children's children, and from generation to generation, so that the legacy of James Rupert Bell Sr. will always be remembered.